You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos Country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Get on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos Country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I am your host, Carl Dumler, and with me, as always, I have my co-host and good friend, Mr. Nick Kendell. Nick, I know you're pretty excited not just about Broncos football, but your Iowa Hawkeyes start this week, and they're playing, is it NIU? Is that right?
Yes, Northern Illinois, who was in the top 4 in the country last year in tackles for loss. They have, I think, the returning lead sack artist in the entire country, and Sutton Smith, kind of more of a running back body. He's like 6'1", 230, but man, he can get after the quarterback. He's got some bursts, and both Iowa's offensive tackles are suspended. So Iowa, I'm expecting a lot of running the ball down their throat and hoping Division I athletes beat non-Power 5 athletes. So we'll see, though. I got season tickets, and it's supposed to rain, so we'll see about that too. But should be a good game, and I'm just excited for football. Preseason week 3 is all a lot of fun, and we had some games last week, and there's a bunch of good college games this week too. I mean, you got Washington versus Auburn, you got Notre Dame versus Michigan, you got Louisville, Alabama, you got Virginia Tech, Florida State. So football is back, like real football stuff that we can analyze, everything like that. And unfortunately for some of you listeners, Colorado State did get beat this week by Hawaii. Not a good start to your season, but you still got Fort Collins, so that's beautiful. Can't complain too much. But yeah, football is here. I'm really excited. You can kind of feel the energy here in Iowa City as well. So a lot of fun and excited for everything to get going.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's in the 60s here today, so it feels like football weather again. Like it's cloudy and windy and just feels like fall. So I was just like, oh man, I feel like it's finally football season. And yeah, very, very excited about all the college football that's going to be on this weekend. And very excited that the Broncos are 2 weeks away from a game that actually truly matters. But we want to let you know, Building the Broncos Focus is all things pertain to your Denver Broncos as it relates to the NFL draft, building the team, draft cuts, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, we do it all. With Nick and myself being armchair GMs, we bring you fresh insight and analysis each and every week in every single episode. From scouting reports, player value, scheme, and personnel fits, and of course, just some general football-related banter. You can follow myself on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH, as well as follow Nick at Nick Kendell MHH. And be sure to tweet us any questions or opinions you have because we live for talking Bronco football. You can also follow the podcast Twitter account at HuddleUpPod. And make sure you check out ours and our co-writers' written content at milehighhuddle.com, a part of 24/7 Sports and an affiliate of the CBS Sports Digital Network. We know you listeners are as football, draft, and Bronco crazy as we are. So please give us a click and subscribe to us on iTunes as well as Stitcher. And don't forget to share us on Facebook and Twitter. We wouldn't be here today without you listeners, so as a call to action, please go and take the time to go to iTunes or Spreaker and rate and subscribe to let your voices be heard on how you enjoy our show. Now, obviously, we have a lot of football to get to today, but we first want to say thank you to our great sponsor, Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/huddleup. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Again, that's www.audibletrial.com/huddleup. All right, Nick, we had the vaunted Game 3 of preseason, the one that everybody looks to, the one that starters are supposed to get their most playing time and get their most truly close to game experience heading into the season.
Rehearsal.
Right, the dress rehearsal. Now, it was kind of weird this year how many teams really didn't view it that way. There's like this weird change where now all of a sudden there's teams going, no, we're not going to play any starters. We don't need – they're good to go. We don't want to get them hurt. If you were coach, would you want your starters playing in this game, or would you kind of want to make sure not to get them hurt?
I would probably play them, maybe not the full game, but like 1.5 quarters. And honestly, I know Jerry Jones is talking about getting rid of 2 games and making it an 18-game season. I think that's poppycock. I think that, you don't want to injure these guys as it is, but cut down the preseason to maybe 3 games instead of 4, and then just move everything up a little bit sooner. You have those combined practices and everything like that. So make it 3 games. Make that 3rd game be the one where it's these guys who are going to be working for Enterprise in a couple weeks. And man, just move everything up just a little bit, because I don't think they need a full 4 games. But I do think 2 is a little bit short, especially when you're trying to figure out that bottom 10, 5 guys on your roster and a practice squad. So I think get it to 3 games. That's what I would do.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm with you. 2 games seems a little too little, but 4 games, I am glad that they keep the full 90 so that you're not having to play some key backups and hope that they don't get hurt when you know that they're going to be on the roster. That definitely makes me a little more excited to see that kind of thing happening. But no, let's just talk about this past game. Let's get into that here for a little bit. We'll do a 6-pack of takeaways that we had from this last game. And it all starts with, we talked about last week, some of the key matchups would be in the trenches. And especially our offensive line having to go against a very, very talented Redskins defensive line. And I would say the Broncos handled them more than okay. I mean, I was downright impressed with how they did both in the run game and the pass game against those starting Redskin defensive linemen. Yeah,
I mean, like we talked about last week, the Redskins have a very, very talented front 5 on that defensive line. I mean, Deron Payne did have a couple good plays, but there was plenty of times that Matt Paradis and Connor McGovern and even Max Garcia were doing fine against them. Jonathan Williams was a non-factor. And I mean, I don't even remember hearing much from Ryan Kerrigan. And the only time I remember Preston Smith making an impact was a negative one when Philip Lindsay beat him on that wheel route. And good job by Keenum finding him right away for that. So, yeah, the Broncos offensive line, I mean, we've been saying it all offseason. Even when we were talking about, potentially adding Quentin Nelson, that the Broncos offensive line is not that bad. They are a run blocking unit. They really needed to fix that right tackle spot and add better coaching. Well, la-di-da, here we are, and the Broncos offensive line is trending up and looks as good as they have in half a decade, maybe longer. So that's really exciting, and I'm really happy to see this offensive line doing well. And you made a very good point when I went back and watched it a second time. I didn't get to watch it live because it was actually the girlfriend's or fiance's, excuse me, mother's birthday. So we went out and had Mexican food, but I got to watch it a replay, which honestly isn't that bad. It's better to kind of get the takeaways when you're watching a replay and you can pause it and watch in slow motion and everything like that. But man, Keenum, you trust that offensive line, buddy. I know you're supposed to be a good pocket mover and everything like that, but I felt like there were some plays where he had plenty of time and it felt like just a little bit rushed. And if you would have just bought a little bit more time, to understand that offensive line where to shift to, he maybe could have found some guys and made a more accurate pass.
The one play that sticks out to me, it was a 3rd down play, and I think it was Emmanuel Sanders ran a crossing route. And I think if he would have just waited just a little bit more or just got a little bit more air under it and let Sanders kind of run under it heading towards the sideline, it would have been a huge play. But I think he just felt a little bit rushed that there's got to be pressure somewhere, and he threw it a little bit late. Or threw it a little bit early, threw it a little bit behind Sanders, and it ended up being a big pass breakup. And I just, like I said, it takes time to get used to your offensive line, to trust them that they're going to hold up. Most of these guys, he's worked a month or two really with. Some of these guys haven't been able to practice. Valdir hasn't been able to practice. Leary hasn't been able to practice. And so, yeah, there's just been some changes and some growing pains and just trying to get used to each other. But Valdir especially, we'll get into him more, but Ryan Kerrigan was a non-factor in that game. Yeah. Because Valdir just owned him. There wasn't even a time he got close to Keenum from what I saw. And I had this disagreement with a Chiefs fan earlier today, or not today, a couple days ago on Twitter. They were talking about how Justin Houston and Chris Jones got a bunch of pressure when they were in during the Bears game. And while they made the quarterback have to step up in the pocket, that's what you hope your quarterback does. They get to their back step, and then they kind of force those outside linebackers or edge rushers, whatever you want to call them, have to commit to coming on the outside, and then you hope that there's a pocket to step up into. That's how football 101 for quarterbacks and offensive line working together in tandem. And something the Broncos obviously haven't seen for a couple of years. But, yeah, I just didn't see the same kind of pressure because that was kind of what the Broncos did with especially Kerrigan. They'd force him to have to commit to the outside. Keenum step up in the pocket, perfect pocket to step up into. Boom, lots and lots of time to throw the football. So definitely great. Love the run blocking on Royce Freeman's touchdown.
Yeah,
that was perfect. Royce Freeman did some great things too, but I don't want to take away from what the offensive line really brought to that picture there too. They got all their guys and they said, hey, you go make a guy miss and it's a touchdown. And that's what he did. So It was, again, just that working in perfect unity as an entire unit.
And even Max Garcia has looked solid So I don't see any way, unless somebody offers a good trade value. I mean, he can play left guard, center, or right guard in a pinch. And if he keeps playing like this, maybe it's been coaching, maybe it's been development that's been the issue this whole time. Max Garcia is still, limited player athletically, but there's definitely upside there. So yeah, really excited about this offensive line, run blocking, pass blocking, and we haven't even hardly seen Ronald Leary in there yet. So it's going to keep getting better. So very, very exciting. Just people got to stay healthy. That's the big thing for the offensive line. But the next point for me got to be the sharing of the love from Case Keenum to all these different weapons the Broncos have in the pass game. I mean, Keenum goes 12 for 18 for 148 yards, 8.2 yards per reception. He did take a sack, and no touchdowns, which is something to watch there. But a 91.9 rating as well, so can't complain. We talked about that. Washington back seven, not very talented overall. They don't really have many horses, and they have Josh Norman, but outside of that, man, the linebackers, the safeties, just not a lot of great starters that they have back there. And the Broncos offensive weapons made it look like that. I mean, Emmanuel Sanders had 8 targets. Man, Emmanuel Sanders is going to be in for a big fantasy football year. I actually had a draft Sunday night, and he went the pick before me, and I about threw my phone across the room. I was really irritated. I think he's going to have a good season this year. And Cortland Sutton finally, really flashed. Some of those plays he made were outstanding. Even that play where he went up and skied against Josh Norman, he lost his footing out of his break, and he still went up there and made that play. So excited to see that. I think Demaryius Thomas is kind of coming along gingerly, but he's going to make an impact. Deshaun Hamilton making some plays, getting open. And also, I really want to touch on the running back usage in Musgrave's offense as well in the passing game. I mean, you had David Williams out there, and I don't think David Williams, I mean, he hasn't run the best. Granted, the third team offensive line, not the best at creating open running lanes, but David Williams made a few catches that where he went up and got it out of his frame, jumped up and then made some plays after the catch. Where, I mean, I thought I had to rewind it because I was like, was that a wide receiver? No, it was David Williams making plays as a receiver and making hands catches. So very impressive. I think he had 3 receptions for 46 yards. So big plays. D'Angelo Henderson also had 3 receptions. And obviously that one we talked about, Phillip Lindsay as well. And then the tight ends. I mean, Hireman had a reception. Jake Butt had a key third down reception. So exciting to see all that. And Keenum, he's not really, but outside of Sanders, I think Sanders is probably looking like the wide receiver 1 this year right now. Just him and Keenum are more in tune than him and DT, or Keenum and DT. But overall, spreading the love, these passing weapons getting involved, and just not singling it on one guy. I love that. And hopefully this will just be a more dynamic offense because of that, along with obviously the offensive line being better, the play action opening it up, and Keenum just being a more competent QB. I do think there's still limitations to Keenum's game. He's still sailing that ball and that out a little bit. Lacks some of those tools that will separate the true elites from where Keenum's at. But if you play a great defense, you have a good offensive line, and the Broncos having that 4th place schedule this year, the Broncos have a chance to go above 500 and challenge for a playoff spot with how they looked in the last 2 games, especially that first team unit. And that has a lot to do with the weapons and the offensive line. Right.
Like you said, that the new offense, the wheel route by Phillip Lindsay against an edge rusher. Oh my goodness. That was perfect call at the perfect time. And one of the more creative play calls. And it seems like it shouldn't be, but there's a lot of teams that just don't know how to use that kind of mismatch. I mean, the Patriots are the very best in the NFL at using that running back for mismatches. And there's a lot of teams that are starting to pick up on that. I mean, Christian McCaffrey, look what he does for the Panthers. I mean, there's a reason that he went so high, because he is a mismatch nightmare. Kamara, again, mismatch nightmare, and teams are starting to pick up on that. And Phillip Lindsay falls right into that category of a guy that has a little bit more speed than you expect. He's shifty. He's got good hands. He knows how to get himself open, and he's a playmaker. And so you get it into your playmaker's hands. And again, that was just perfect call, perfect time, and just a great way to understand the kind of matchups that are the other team is trying to show on the field. So very, very excited about what the offense is showing. And another thing that I'm very excited about is just seeing the defensive line depth. It is real. I mean, Gotsis got himself a nice sack really early in that game. He looks like he's really coming around pretty well. He had a couple plays where he got himself out of position. But beyond that, I thought he had a very, very solid game. And then, of course, you got Harris, who is just where was this guy? I'm so glad that he didn't show this with the Raiders. But with the Broncos, he is just really, especially from that 3-tech, 5-tech, or not 5-tech, but 1-tech kind of spot. This guy really showing up well for the Broncos and adding another pass rush option for the Broncos. Plus, he does pretty good against the run as well. The players you have in our notes a little bit, the players I've actually been a little more disappointed in. Derek Wolfe, I haven't really seen him make much of a play yet. And D'Amato Pecco, he's gotten pushed back a couple times in the run game. So, I mean, they haven't had a ton of snaps, so I'm not going to over panic on some of that, but it's just nice to see the young guys are really stepping up. And I mean, that's the big thing with this team is heading into the season, there are so many question marks because they have so much youth at so many different positions. And it's nice to see that the youth are actually living up to the potential. And I mean, that's what we saw in this third preseason game.
Yeah, definitely a great Bronco rookie class, and seeing some of these young guys step up has been huge. And I got to say, Adam Gotsis, probably one of my favorite games and flashes from him of his entire career so far as a Bronco. I mean, he had the sack, he was getting pressure, he was bull rushing, he had a couple of rip moves, and he was doing pretty good at stopping the run game as well. So Adam Gotsis, keep on stepping it up. And I mean, Shelby Harris and Adam Gotsis honestly looked like our best two interior defensive linemen in this class. DeMarcus Walker also had a couple good plays. Man, if he just had a bull rush, he would be so much more effective. But right now it's mainly that swim move where he's working back and forth, kind of keeping his eyes on this quarterback. And then if the quarterback starts to step up, he can disengage and then attack that guy. So a lot of coverage sacks coming from DeMarcus Walker, which, I mean, he's still staying in front of him, staying disciplined and not giving him a big lane. So there's value there. But yeah, I love this defensive line. And Wolf didn't have a great game. It wasn't as bad as the week 1 game versus the Vikings, but I also got to give Wolf a little bit of slack from this game because he was going up against Brandon Scherf, who was, I believe, the 5th overall pick a few years ago of the Redskins. Yeah, I've seen Scherf at Hy-Vee before, which is a local grocery store around here. And oh my God, I was scared for my life. Like, he's not mean or anything, but oh my God, what an intimidating human being. Like the full beard, 6'5", 320 plus pounds. Like, he was grocery shopping. It was just meat in the grocery cart. I swear to God, just meat. And I was like, wow, that is a horrifying human. So there's a reason he went 5th overall, and he's got the mentality and stuff. And he gave Wolf a lot of issues. Although I think it was Gotsis beat him one time. So the Brandon Scherf is not infallible, even though he's a Hawkeye. Really, really good interior offensive lineman. And man, that was watching Scherf and Trent Williams play was a lot of fun because I'm an defensive line guy. But Broncos held their own on that defensive front, and they're gonna make some plays this year. I don't think there's a truly elite defensive line player either. There's no Fletcher Cox, Aaron Donald, Geno Atkins, DeForest Buckner, one of those game changer 3-down types. But the depth that they have and the different amount of bodies and different types of guys they have on the inside is going to make a difference all season long. And I'm really excited about it because if you can continuously get after the quarterback, harass them, and have guys up front on that defensive line, your defense is going to be at least average. That's where it starts. It starts up front, pass rush, stopping the run up front, and Broncos have that. So I think the defense, they might not be as good as they were the last 2 years. The secondary's got more questions than they've had in a while, and Brandon Marshall looks like he's regressing, and so is Darian Stewart. But that defensive front, it's going to keep the boat afloat for the Broncos on defense all season, and I think they'll be, a top 10 unit for sure. So, all right, well, moving on here, the next point of our 6-packs that we want to take away from the game. Running back battle is not over with. Who makes this roster? Now, we'll talk about that a little bit here going forward in one of our later sections, but a lot of different talk going on from the Broncos right now. Is Freeman the starter? Is Booker the starter? What's Philip Lindsay's role going to be? David Williams, D'Angelo Henderson, et cetera, et cetera. Not a lot of definitive answers there right now. And there is some talk that the Broncos have been shopping Booker, which would offer some clarity for the Broncos at the position. I would be all for it, adding some draft capital, even if it's just a 6th-round pick. That'll create a roster spot for somebody else, somebody younger. And I think Booker's on the last year of his contract as well. So I wouldn't be against that. I also wouldn't be against them keeping him because he definitely is the safest option. But I think Freeman, as long as Freeman continues to progress as a route runner, pass catcher, and above all, we've heard it here 1,000 times, as a pass protector, he's going to be the guy that's going to take over this role, majority of the carries, et cetera, et cetera. And Philip Lindsay is showing to be too dynamic to leave off the field too much. So Booker looks like, as the season goes on, the odd man out. Will the team trade him? Will they keep him? I mean, that's yet to be seen. And then we'll talk about some of these bubble battles later on, but it's definitely an interesting spot.
I wouldn't panic too much, Bronco fans. I know some people, we get on Twitter plenty of times throughout the day, and we get to see kind of the panic of, why is Booker getting to sit out and not Freeman? This is ridiculous. And I loved Vance Joseph's answer to that today. Of it more depends on the offensive lineup that we go with. If we're in I formation, we're going to go with Freeman. If we're in spread 5 wide, you're not going to put Freeman out there on that. You're going to put Phillip Lindsay or you're going to put Booker out there. So it's just I like that diversity, and I like that understanding of play your players to their strength. And so, again, this is going to be a free-flowing thing. I don't think you're going to see one guy. I mean, I think Freeman, as time goes on, will be your for sure leader in rushing attempts per game. But I still think this is going to be maybe a 2-3-headed monster as we go throughout the season because, like you said, you can't keep Phillip Lindsay off the field the entire game. You want to have that playmaking ability. Booker does have value. I know a lot of people are questioning that, but he is a good receiver. He is good in the open field. And like you said, at least right now, he's the most trustworthy when it comes to pass blocking. So there's value in that. Let's not forget that. And he's cheap. I mean, it's not like they're paying a king's ransom to keep this guy around. So, there's plenty of things to look at there, and it'll shake out some here in this 4th preseason game. I think that's one of those positions. How a guy performs could really decide if he's on this roster. And it's the same with kind of the cornerback depth. That was another thing that we wanted to talk about here of this game is, I mean, there's a reason that the Broncos went and got the guy that they did. And I know some people are pretty upset about the Broncos bringing in Pac-Man Jones, but the depth just isn't there. Yadam and Langley, they just haven't developed it like the team would hope for at this point. And the other guys, I mean, right now we'd only be 3 deep. So do you really want to go in the season just hoping all 3 of those guys stay healthy the entire year and don't miss a single snap? That's just not the odds of that are slim to none, I guess I would say. So it's going to be an interesting thing moving forward of how they shake out that cornerback depth as well.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. I think I'm not sure if we'll be on the same page here, but we'll talk about the bubble battles with cornerback going forward. And I guess it's supposed to be a 6-pack of takeaways, but I'll add a 7th one just because who doesn't like having a 7th free beer in a 6-pack? Special teams, again, standing out. You know, very, very good play from King, from the coverage units to my number one standout. The first one I'm going to talk about here as we move on to standouts, Brandon McManus. Man, good game, hit some monster field goals. Time and time again was consistent. He just a great game. Hit a 56 long, 17 points overall for the game. It came from Brandon McManus. So 5 for 5 field goals in the first half. So pretty
Mr.
darn good.
Money now.
Yeah,
he's back to McMoney.
Yeah, he needs to be.
Not McMiss.
Yeah. So good for him. Good to see that. And Marquette King, 2 punts, 47-yard average, 49 long, consistent, good. And the coverage unit's pretty good as well. So special teams, I'm going to keep saying it. Not enough people. I've been on the offensive line as get enough credit or attention trained for a few seasons. Well, special teams, you're up there with me now as well. My next standout I want to talk about is DeMonte Thomas, an undrafted free agent last year from Michigan. And man, this dude looked the best I've seen anybody playing that dimebacker role, covering tight ends and coverage in a while. They didn't have Jordan Reed out there. The Redskins didn't. But Vernon Davis, he's not a bad athlete at all. And Thomas made some big tackles. He had a pass breakup. I think he had 2 big tackles on 3rd down to keep him short and making plays all over the field. I'm not sure exactly what his weight is. I think he's listed around 200, which isn't totally ideal for a dimebacker. You'd rather have him up there, 210, 215. But he played physical, made big plays, and he's got some speed to close. So DeMonte Thomas, great game from him, and he has to make this 53 as far as I'm concerned, especially with the injuries to Will Parks and the questionable return of Sua Cravens. Emmanuel Sanders again. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to add real quick. There was one play where I think it was Darian Stewart was trying to cover Vernon Davis, and Davis was just pulling right away from him. I mean, it wasn't even close in athleticism. So then to see DeMonte Thomas keeping up with him, that, like you said, Vernon Davis, he's slowed down, but he's still an athlete. So that's something special to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah, I was very impressed. He stood out a lot there. Everybody's talking about him, how he didn't make a mistake. He did actually make one big mistake on, I think it was Capri Bibbs, had a big run to the right, and he still would have gained some yards because some of the defensive linemen and linebackers got blocked up. But I think it was a pass action after the handoff to the left, kind of like a bubble screen fake to gosh, I don't remember who the wide receiver was, but it's Colt McCoy. And I saw DeMonte Thomas just totally bite on that, run to the right, and then all of a sudden look, and here comes the running back down the right side past him for, a 38-yard run or something like that. It was a big run from Capri Bibbs, and that reason was because Thomas bit really hard on that pass action. But other than that, great game and a standout, and has been standing out, I think, all training camp and all preseason. So definitely worth following, and definitely should make this team. Matt Paradis, man, I've definitely been, I wouldn't say, I like to play armchair GM, but I said, no, Matt Paradis, maybe it's a guy you could move. You can get some draft capital for. Are you going to pay him? Maybe a better zone fit. Connor McGovern might be a better fit at center, et cetera, et cetera. Well, Paradis, man, Deron Payne's first round pick, Matt Paradis ate his lunch all game long, moving him, getting to the second level, and looking more powerful and explosive than I can remember him looking for probably 2 years. Last year he's coming off those hip surgeries. The year before that he had the hip issues, and he's looking healthy and good. So hopefully that can continue, because, man, what a difference he's made up front in the run game and the pass game. He's looked fantastic to me. So those are my 4 guys that had really stood out: DeMonte Thomas, Matt Paradis, and Emmanuel Sanders. We kind of talked about him, but Emmanuel Sanders looks spry, athletic, and him and Keenum are going to be, I think, the connection this year in the pass game. So look forward to that. So DeMonte Thomas, Matt Paradis, Emmanuel Sanders, and Brandon McManus as my 4 standouts from this game.
Good list. I like that list a lot. And I texted you after the game that this was my guy, that I wanted to make sure I got him this time, because I knew you were wanting him too. But Jared Veldheer, I mean, how can you not like what he did in that game? He's gotten better every week of the preseason. You can just see he's getting more comfortable with his injury. He's finally getting healthy again, and just like him, I don't know, just very, very impressed with him. Royce Freeman, again, I mean, 3 straight weeks, 3 touchdowns, or a touchdown every week, I guess I should say, not 9 touchdowns total, but 3 touchdowns total. And they've been, 2 of them have been really long touchdowns, where he really he has such incredible vision. This is the one thing you never know with running backs coming out of college. Are they going to have the vision you need to really make it in the NFL? Because the holes are a lot smaller in the NFL than they are in college. You can run a freight truck through some of the holes in college. But he has had great vision. He's had great patience, and he's made guys miss. So definitely something that I've just been very impressed with. I want to add another wide receiver here, Cortland Sutton. I mean, the guy is just showing up. The guy is making more plays each week again of preseason. That's what I love to see, is these guys are improving. And he made big plays against a pretty good cornerback, where he went up and just out-jumped him. I mean, that's what we're going to be seeing this year, that you can just throw it up and let this guy go make a play. And he's going to have lots of opportunities because, DT and Sanders are going to get a lot more attention. And you're just going to – teams are really going to have to pick their poison this year with this team. And so Sutton is going to get a lot of easier matchups, and this is why I don't want them to trade DT. I know there's been a lot of talks of him getting traded, even like to the Patriots. Why would we trade him to the Patriots?
Yeah, let's help Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. Yeah,
unless they are offering like their next couple first rounds or first round, second round pick next year. I'm sorry, you're not trading DT to him. That's just ridiculous. And so very, very impressed with him. And then I wanted to put in here for my 4th one. I mean, we already kind of talked about him a little bit, but Adam Gotsis, he's had a pretty crazy offseason. And a lot of people questioning, is he even going to be on this team? Mostly because of the legal issues. But I think, especially since that all got settled, you've just really seen this guy been able to focus on football, and he's showing up a little bit more. I love this when I see this in preseason. Guys that just keep improving as time goes on. And with more snaps, they just get really into the flow of the game. And so I definitely got to give him a shout out, especially for his sack, because I kind of, in the prediction thread that we always do of all of us writers at Mile High Huddle, I'd said the interior guys were going to get 3 sacks. And right off the bat, when Adam Gotsis got that, I'm like, here we go. My prediction's coming true. They didn't quite make it to that 3 sacks. But no, his was really nice to see. I don't know. I just was very, very impressed with how he has grown since his rookie year.
Yeah, I cannot disagree with you. Royce Freeman, I think if you listeners remember, you and I both were, but mainly me, we were a little bit of detractors of the Broncos taking him with that 3rd pick. And come to find out, I think definitely in hindsight, I should have been higher on him than I was. But I think a big reason is because the gosh darn 49ers stole, I'm going to use the word stole, Fred Warner right before the Broncos could pick him. The Broncos were actually on the phone with linebacker Fred Warner from BYU saying that they were going to pick him. And then lo and behold, he's getting a phone call on the other line. It's the 49ers letting him know that they were picking him a pick before. So I'm still a little bitter about that. I really think Fred Warner is going to be a great starting linebacker in this league, 3-down linebacker even, and that's way more valuable than running back. I'm sorry, the running back value. I wanted to get John Kelly in the 5th round if we could, and hey, look, John Kelly's looking pretty good too. So not that surprised. Right. But Freeman, he's got more burst than I thought he would. Vision, patience. It's just that extra area of his game that I still need to see from him, from pass catching to route running to pass blocking. That area that makes him a complete back, that if I'm using a day 1 or a day 2 pick on a running back, they need to have that.
Yeah, and it was hard to evaluate him just in the sense of his last year in college, he was hurt.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of, you could tell he just didn't have the step that he had, especially his sophomore year.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, well, which guy are you getting? Are you getting that guy that looked very explosive his sophomore year? Or are you getting this guy that looks like the tread's falling off the tires? And so far, thankfully, we've got the guy that looks pretty explosive. And so that's very exciting. But like you said, he's still got a long ways to go in his development. And so far, so good, but we can do better.
Yeah, and I think a big part of his success, I mean, he's been good, obviously. But again, I talked about it a little bit earlier. The Broncos' offensive line has been killing it. They really have. I mean, they're opening up some run lanes, like that big touchdown run. You mentioned it. He did make those last 2 guys, kept his balance, and then kept going. But, man, what a hole to run through. Good patience, good vision, good burst to get through it. But that hole was there, and there's been a few others too. So excited about that, and I'm excited just to see the run game all season because that just makes me happy. Run game and good defense, that's football to me. All right, go ahead.
Just real quick, I just wanted to say, plus I want to see more celebrations by the offensive line like we saw in that game.
Yes.
That was pretty special.
Absolutely. When the offensive line is out there having fun and spiking the ball and dancing, everybody's having a good time. All right, well, moving on now, we have our letdowns, and I believe for the 2nd straight week on my list I have, maybe even the 3rd straight week, Brandon Marshall, he's looking fast out there, but I see him either being a little bit slow or guessing wrong on some of his lanes that he's going on. And then when an offensive lineman does get him, he is just being washed away. So it's just frustrating. I see him. He looks like he's been regressing. The Broncos do have a contract option on him next season. The way he's playing right now, and the money he has, I just really doubt that he's on this team after this season, but he's been a disappointment. Todd Davis wasn't a standout this week either. He struggled as well. But Brandon Marshall, just really struggling in the run game, I think, and he's going to have to be better there. Otherwise, the teams are going to continue to run at him. Another letdown I had a hard time finding real letdowns in this game, but a letdown for me in this game was Bradley Roby. Maybe expectations are too high because of how talented and how great Aqib Talib was, Chris Harris Jr., that Roby as the 3rd cornerback, that whole unit was amazing. But I think the Broncos' first team unit only gave up, 33 passing yards, something like that. But I think Roby surrendered 31 of them. He got beat on a slant, there's just a couple other times. So Roby just needs to be more consistent, and he didn't have a terrible game by any means, but when compared to Chris Harris Jr. and et cetera, he could have had a better game. So kind of a letdown there.
I think the one thing that bothered me the most was that play where I think it was Paul Richardson caught the pass and he just kind of gave up, didn't even touch him.
Yeah.
And then Richardson got back up and ran for a few more yards. And Roby was just standing there and he's just like, no, I'm done.
Yeah.
That attitude really bothered me because that's been one of the big questions with him is how committed is he really to being great and that it's just being an athlete. And right there, I was just like, oh, man, you got to show more than that.
Hopefully it's just, it's preseason kind of mentality, but that carries over to the regular season. So we will see. He's still got high potential. I got faith in him, but he was somewhat of a letdown in this game, in a game that did not have many first-team letdowns. Just in a normal, if it was the week before, or the week after, or the week before, week 1 or 2, I probably wouldn't have had him listed. And then finally, one for me, not really a player, but something I feel like kind of lost in the shuffle that's worth monitoring here as we go forward is the red zone offense. The Broncos moved the ball inside, the 20s, everything like that. But once they got down there to the end zone, the red zone area, they failed to put it in the end zone from that first team offense. Royce Freeman had that big run and everything like that. But Broncos got to be better scoring when they get down there. They get all that way down. Brandon McManus going 5 for 5. That's great. But you also want to see them, 3 points compared to 7 points is the make or break. And many games throughout the season. That would be the difference in a few games. So got to see that red zone offense clean up and to get more opportunities there. And when they do get down there, got to score.
I like that list. Well, mine, I went with Isaac Yiadom, gave up that big touchdown in the second half. And you just think, okay, well, he's moving down to the backup list instead of playing against all these starters. He should shine. Nope, same issues. And again, he's usually in position. He has very little awareness of what's going on around him. That's the big thing. And so he's got a long ways to go because that's always one of the hardest things for cornerbacks to learn going from college to the NFL. So, I mean, and we saw it later on where they brought in somebody else because they're just realizing that depth isn't where it needs to be heading into the season. My second one would be the wide receivers after the top four. I mean, you know that you have DT, Sanders, Sutton, and Hamilton. Those four, they're fine. No issues there. All going to be very good players, all going to produce for us this year. But have you seen a player that you think absolutely deserves that fifth spot?
Honestly, I've been going back and forth here. Tim Patrick has made a few great catches, and I thought he was doing better in special teams than we saw in the past. And I think on most teams, he would be a guy that makes the roster, but the Broncos have really good 1 through 4, so he might not. And then Isaiah McKenzie, I feel like right now everybody's kind of got a little bit of PTSD from the turnovers, rightfully so. And he's not really a true offensive guy. He's more of a special teams ace, and can you afford to have that on the 53? I think if you can keep him, you should, but no, that's another debate we'll have here.
Right. And Tim Patrick would be that guy that I would maybe make an argument for that has shown something here in the preseason. But the rest of them, I've seen some drops on some pretty easy passes. I haven't seen anybody getting that tons of separation. I don't know, just a little disappointed in this group that I haven't seen that other guy really emerge other than, like I said, Tim Patrick. Like, he has made a couple really nice catches. So maybe that's my guy there. But I just, for what we were hearing during training camp, that some of these guys were making a lot of plays and really making a name for themselves. I haven't seen it as much as I would like. And then my third one is just the DT Keenum connection. I was a little disappointed in some of that. I mean, you just see him where Keenum wants to throw it to Sanders because he just has this level of comfort of knowing Sanders is going to be where he wants him to. And I know that they spend a lot of time this offseason working together. And I just really wish DT would have been committed to that as well, because I think this offense would go to a whole new level if DT and Keenum had that same connection. And I see him having more of a connection with Sutton right now than I do DT, which is kind of shocking that a rookie is the guy that he trusts more than a guy that's been one of the most consistent wide receivers in the NFL over the last 6 years. So that'll take time. I know that. And for those who are doing fantasy football, DT might be one of those guys for the playoff run where he could really show up and make a lot of good stats for you. But I don't know early on in the season how big of an impact player he's going to be.
All righty. Well, good Broncos win 29-17. They beat the Washington Redskins almost in every single phase of the game. Means had the ball 10 more minutes, outgained them almost 400 to 250. The rushing game was great, 5 yards per carry. If you're running the ball for 5 yards per carry, oftentimes you're going to win, although the Broncos do give up 5.4 yards per carry. But they really shut down that Redskins passing game as well. So Alex Smith just didn't look good the whole game, which is great to see after him doing well against the Broncos with Kansas City the past few years. But all right, now we got to probably talk a little bit about the addition of Pac-Man Jones. Adam Jones, I think, is what he wants to go by now. I don't know if you got a chance to catch his press conference, but he did seem more mature coming across. I know he's had some issues in the past, but Vance Joseph knows him. I do believe Joe Woods knows him as well. And he's going to be 35, but he's fighting for just that third or fourth cornerback spot, which Jermaine Brock and those backup guys. And an interesting tidbit from Pro Football Focus over the last 2 seasons with a minimum of 800 snaps. He is the 4th best cornerback in football in yards per coverage snap allowed, with Aqib Talib number 1 at .66, Chris Harris Jr. at .72, Patrick Peterson at .78, and Adam Jones at .79. Granted, last season he did have a poor PFF grade. I believe it was the run support was a big issue with him, but I am happy to have the depth. It's something that we've been pushing on. I think I've had 2 articles since preseason or training camp that talked about my concern about the depth at cornerback for the Broncos being a big issue. And it looks like John Elway and Kubiak and the front office agreed that cornerback depth was an issue. I mean, if Roby and or, knock on wood, Harris went down, this team's cornerbacks would be, in so much trouble. So adding a guy like Adam Jones, I feel like is a good move for the Broncos. There are some questions, obviously, with the off-field, but he does seem like he's matured, and I think if Vance Joseph knows him, he does seem like he has a lot of respect for Vance Joseph as well, which goes a long way. So hopefully, he's a dad now, and he can contribute for this team and come in and push Brock for that cornerback 3 role.
Right, and the other big thing that he adds is obviously stability at the punt return spot.
Yeah.
Let's say they do keep McKenzie, and the first couple games he has a couple fumbles. Well, you got a legit punt returner in Adam Jones that can go in there and at least be very secure. I think I read something about how he's only lost 2 fumbles his entire career on punt returns, and he's one of the most dynamic punt returners in NFL history. So that's just something big to have on the team as that backup in case things don't work out with McKenzie. I don't know if they're going to keep McKenzie or not. We'll kind of see. Maybe they're trying Adam Jones, just seeing what he has left in him at that kind of position. But it's just the more depth you can have, the better. And I also think this is a move that shows the team thinks that they have a pretty good team. You don't bring in a 35-year-old or 34-year-old this late in the season unless you really think that, hey, if we can get this extra little boost at this one position that's really lacking. I don't know. I just think that's a really good, promising thing that they're really liking what they have going with this team this year.
Yeah, so I definitely feel better about that. However, I don't want the Broncos to move on from Langley or Isaac Adam yet, so definitely worth watching. Now, we still have a bit to get to, but before we do, let us tell you about why you need to become a Mile High Huddle VIP subscriber. Mile High Huddle's approach to covering the Broncos isn't just about reporting the news, although we do pride ourselves on being able to relay you all the breaking news as it happens in real time. But what we like to focus on is breaking down the Broncos from an in-depth perspective. All 22 film reviews, X's and O's, deep dives on player evaluation, film work, etc., etc. We save our best and most in-depth content for our premium members, the VIP subscribers. To become a Mile High Huddle VIP and get access to 100% of our written analysis, as well as our VIP insider forums, just click the green banner on the top of the website, Mile High Huddle, click the monthly or annual option, and you'll be locked in. From there, you get access to everything we produce, which includes any insider information we pick up along the way. We work hard to bring you the best Broncos coverage and analysis on the web. We ask you for your support by becoming a VIP subscriber. Pull the trigger and you have my word, you will not be disappointed. All right, well, moving on here, we're not going to go as in-depth as we will throughout the season or even the last few weeks with the Scouts Eye preview because, honestly, the Arizona Cardinals' depth is not very exciting, and we're going to be seeing 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, all the way to 100th stringers in this Week 4 preseason game. So, honestly, it's going to be very kind of almost like a JV game out there. Granted, these are some of the better players in their colleges, but you're not going to really have the cohesion and everything, and the play calling. It's going to be very much a watered-down product, but you're goddamn right I'm going to be tuning in because I am a fanatic and I'm still going to watch it and analyze it and have opinions because I am a psychopath, as are probably you listeners as well. So excited for that. Big question is we're going to see Rosen. That's a guy that I was very high on in the draft process. I thought he could be a very talented quarterback. Didn't have the athletic tools or the pocket awareness or movement that Baker or Darnold or even Josh Allen had. But, he played quarterback very methodically and put a decent offensive line around him. He's going to be a good quarterback. So he has a thumb injury. Are we going to see him? I'm not sure. It might even be best if we don't see him for his sake because, as we talked about earlier, the Broncos' defensive line depth is very talented, and I still expect to see some guys like Harris, McDonald, Kerr getting in there, and those guys have looked pretty solid as well, Jamarcus Walker. So probably the best for Josh Rosen if he wants to not get hit a bunch, or if the team doesn't want him to get hit a bunch, to not have him out there too much. And that not only because of Josh Rosen, but goodness gracious, the Cardinals' depth at the offensive line is bad. I don't know how much you've gotten a chance to look at the roster there, Carl, but
yeah,
God, it is the depth.
I've watched a lot of Rosen this offseason just because, as much as I don't want to think the Broncos are tied to Rosen, there is still some of that, hey, if this guy turns into something, why didn't you go after him?
Yeah.
And
same with Josh Allen.
And Josh Allen, all those guys that got picked after. But yeah, watching Rosen, the guy has no time. He's hitting his back foot his back step, and boom, he's already getting hit. So he's got to get that ball out of there as quick as possible. And I've been impressed with him this offseason, or this preseason, I guess. And just all the pressure that he's had against him. I mean, it's flashbacks to UCLA where he was getting hit left and right. And yet here he is still performing. So like I said, I've been impressed, but that offensive line for the Cardinals, oh my goodness, that's going to get somebody killed back there.
Yeah, I'm just going to read the names here, and you stop me when you recognize a name. John Wetzel, Evan Boehm, Daniel Munier, because they did lose their backup center is now their starter because they lost their starting center. Josh Allen, not the quarterback, and then Will Holden. Honestly, out of these guys, the only guy that really stands out to me is Will Holden, and I thought he could be a decent development swing tackle in the league. And he was in the draft 2 years ago from Vanderbilt. But this is
I recognize Evan Boehm as well from Missouri. He's a name that I remember watching a few games on, being like, he's okay. He could be a depth piece. But yeah, I don't see any guys that I'm sitting there going, oh yeah, that's pretty impressive. It's I don't know if these guys would make many rosters.
It's the Arizona Cardinals offensive line is not great behind their starters. I mean, they do have an okay starting unit: DJ Humphries, Mike Iupati, Mason Cole, Justin Pugh, and Andre Smith, but not great. So, Josh Rosen, if you play, I'm sorry, buddy, I still like you. Mike Glennon, might be honestly auditioning for a spot with another team. If the Cardinals do move on from him, it might even be the Broncos. There's some talk that the Broncos do want to keep 3 quarterbacks this year. We'll see. I'll be disappointed if that happens. I think Chad Kelly's probably shown enough, but we'll see. There's just a lot of other guys I want to sneak on the roster. But yeah, not a great roster. And honestly, even the starters aren't fantastic. And I think the Cardinals are in contention for a top 5, top 10 pick again this season. So we'll be watching that, but the backups, not great. You got Vontarius Dora starting as well. He's kind of an interesting guy. Broncos fans should know him. Scooby Wright, Gerald Hodges, Christian Campbell, a guy from Penn State playing cornerback. Ben Wickery from Dallas, who got burnt left and right last year. So just not a good depth of this team. Chad Williams will be interesting. He's 3rd round pick 2 seasons ago. Christian Kirk, Greg Little, JJ Nelson. But overall, man, I think the Broncos should do pretty well. The Broncos are a deeper team than I think a lot of people give credit to. Now the Broncos could lose this game because if Paxton Lynch comes in and everything just falls apart,
right?
What can you do?
Seems to happen. Right.
What can you do? But that's overall, the Broncos should have a pretty good game because this Cardinals team, depth-wise, I'm just not seeing it. So I don't know. Did they give up their 1st round pick this season to move up for Josh Rosen?
Seems like they did. I can't remember.
They traded up. I believe it was with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to the 10th overall pick. No, it was with the Raiders.
No, then they didn't give up a 1st. I think they only gave up a 3rd then.
Yeah, wow.
I remember right, Raiders. Because I remember I'm sitting there going, they gave up a 3rd round pick and a 5th round selection to the Raiders. And
they kept their 1st. Well, that's great news for Josh Rosen and the Cardinals because they can get an offensive lineman to help him this upcoming draft because he needs it. But yeah, it's not a good team. Arizona has not looked great. They got a 1st-year head coach, and I think they're doing things to help Rosen, but I just don't know about the weapons around him. If you put him on the 1st team, I think he'd have a shot. But right now, it looks like it's going to be Sam Bradford is that guy. So I just hope they don't kill Josh Rosen because I do like good young quarterback play. There's a decent amount of young quarterbacks, and it would be a real shame if one of the Broncos killed him.
It's true. It's very true. We both really liked Rosen coming out of the draft. We liked a lot of quarterbacks this last draft, but Rosen just seemed like I'd say the highest floor of all the quarterbacks. He looks like a pocket passer that can really make his name out there and maybe not be that top 3 quarterback, but be in that top 10 consideration most years in the NFL. But yeah, I look for the Broncos to do pretty well. The only thing I see here is maybe because the Cardinals do have pretty good backup quarterbacks here with Rosen and Glennon, that with very little secondary depth, especially at the cornerback position, I could see the Broncos having some struggles there.
Just like with Chase Daniel.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's some of that I could see of why they lose. But beyond that, I just don't see anything that really scares me or makes me go, oh my gosh, this Arizona Cardinals team. they got something going here. They have a lot of missing pieces. Like you said, they have some good starters, but even in their starting units, they have some major holes up there. So I don't know. It's just one of those games where you're just kind of looking for some individual battles and seeing if some guys can win, because there are some roster spots still available. And how about we get into that here a little bit with the Broncos and maybe some things to really keep an eye on for this game, or at least players really to keep an eye on. And it starts off, let's just go quarterback. We can go each position because they all have a little bit of something going on here.
Oh, but first you got to say my brilliant name for this segment.
Bubble battles.
That's probably one of the more fun words or phrases that we've come up with this show. Bubble battles. I really like the BB, the double letters with the BUBBLE and BATTLES. So just let me be weird there for a second. Bubble battles, starting off with quarterback.
All right, there we go. All right, so let's look at this. Chad Kelly's going to start. Chad Kelly's going to be on this team. There's no question about that. There's a question of 2 quarterbacks or 3 quarterbacks. Chad Kelly, I still think he needs to play pretty decent. I don't think he needs to be outstanding for the team to just consider keeping 2 quarterbacks. But Paxton Lynch, this is his audition for other teams, in my opinion. I have a hard time seeing how the Broncos keep him around. It's either trade him or cut him because he was that bad that nobody wanted to trade for him.
Yeah, I agree with you. However, there has been some talk that the Broncos are considering keeping him and keeping 3 quarterbacks on the roster. So it's line season right now. A lot of teams are trying to boast players up to hopefully get a little bit of trade value if they can get anything. Oh man, maybe they won't release him, or maybe there's interest elsewhere, so we have to trade for him. It worked last year for Ty Sambrailo. The Falcons sent us a 5th-round pick for him. Thank you again, Atlanta. But
greatest trade by Elway ever.
Yeah,
I still can't believe that happened. But yeah, I don't know. I have a hard time seeing how they keep him around, or I think you'd have a pretty big riot by the fan base if Paxton makes the 53-man roster, because he's not one of the top 53 players by any means, not even close. I mean, I'd argue that he'd be one of the bottom 5 players on this 90-man roster. That's how bad he has been. I was a Paxton apologist for a long time. Not anymore. See you later, Paxton. I'm with everybody now. I cringe when he comes in the game. That's how I am. I'm no longer excited. So I can't see how he's on this team, but I could see them thinking about bringing in a veteran. I still don't like that idea, just because there's other positions that I'd rather keep players at, and 3 quarterbacks really limits what you can do on keeping some players that I think could be key contributors this year.
Yeah, I agree with you. So Paxton Lynch, we'll see what happens. Maybe he flashes. I'm just hoping that he shows enough to get some trade value, give him a fresh start, give Denver a fresh start, and just move on. But it'll be interesting. I think it sounds like he's going to get almost the entire second half. So I would give Chad Kelly the whole game. But what can you do? All right, moving on. Something more interesting probably is running back. I'm not sure. Apparently we're not going to see Booker, although that's too bad. We'd love to see him play, maybe get some trade value. There is some talk the Broncos are potentially looking to trade him. We'll see, because they would like to keep D'Angelo Henderson on the roster if they can. There's apparently some interest for him as well. So it's going to be interesting how this back in the running back position is settled. The only 2 guys that I feel 100% sure that are going to be on this roster are the 2 rookies, or I guess 2 of the 3 rookies, and Royce Freeman and Phillip Lindsay. Both, I think, are solidified on this roster. But it sounds like Freeman's going to play as well. So, gosh, knock on wood that he doesn't get hurt. I don't hate him being out there. Give him some more pass sets, get him out there blocking for not the starting quarterback, send him in routes a few times. Just keep getting him that work that he needs to be a more rounded running back. But, gosh, if he gets hurt, it's going to look like a terrible decision. And The big one I'm looking for is D'Angelo Henderson versus David Williams. D'Angelo Henderson definitely supposed to be a more explosive running back, although I've been somewhat disappointed with his explosion in preseason. I've seen linebackers and safeties, run him down in pursuit a few times, and I'm not sure. I know he had that car accident earlier in the training camp, the offseason. I'm not sure if that's affecting him at all or anything like that, but I think David Williams, he's shown better as a receiver. Again, talking about those hands catches he was making earlier where he went up to get it away from his body, which, you do not see that from running backs very often. Normally, if it's outside of that strike zone, they're going to have a hard time bringing it down. And then also, I would argue, besides Booker, Williams is the best pass blocker on this team at running back. So definitely going to be interesting to see how that back end works for the running backs. And this game probably will decide who they keep.
Yeah, this is the one position that I'm like, this really matters how they play in this game. The other positions, I think mostly everything is kind of set, but running back, there's so many different directions this could go. Like you said, there's only about 2 guys that are for sure solidified in this group. I think Booker, it's either trade or he's on the team. I don't think there's any way that he's getting cut. But then it comes down to really Henderson versus Williams. Who do you keep? And I'm still kind of more of the interest of Henderson, just because I think you got 2 in between the tackle runners and Booker and Freeman, even though Booker's not a great between the tackle runner, but that's more you're not going to have him running to the outside a ton. And so then you got 2 big-time playmakers in Lindsey and Henderson. I do think Henderson is coming back from injury from that car wreck. Like you said, I don't think he's as explosive as he was last year, but I did see a little bit more of that explosiveness this last game. He had a little bit more, not as much as last year, like I said, but he's getting a little bit closer. And so I'm more on the Henderson train than the Williams train. We're kind of both flip-flopped on that, but it's going to be close. Like I said, I think whoever outplays the other in this next game on the roster.
Yeah, you are probably correct. So we'll see about that. It'll be interesting who they keep. I mean, maybe they'll only keep 3 because Janovich is making this team. Apparently Janovich isn't going to play this game. So that to me screams, Janovich, congratulations, you're on the Broncos again. And he made some big blocks last game. I like to see him. If they're going to have him on the team, get him more involved. Run that power. Let that be the identity of the team. Wide receiver, much more interesting. Demaryius Thomas, Manuel Sanders, Cortland Sutton, and D'Angelo Henderson. Deshaun Hamilton, another DH, all made the team for sure. But after that, a lot of questions. Isaiah McKenzie, are they going to get him more offensive reps this game? Tim Patrick, a guy who's flashed in camp. He's made a couple good catches in preseason, but he's going to have to continue showing special teams because that 5th, 6th wide receiver has to contribute in special teams, no doubt about it. River Craycraft, John Dyars, Chapman. So there's a lot of different wide receivers. Most of these guys aren't going to make it. I think the main 2 we probably need to look for, though, are McKenzie and Patrick, with the potential of Craycraft or Dyars going to practice squad.
Yeah, right now, I guess I'm kind of starting to lean towards Lindsey and not Pac-Man Jones, Adam Jones is what it wants to be called now, kind of taking over those punt return duties. And I think between the 2 of them, you can still have that explosive player in Philip Lindsey, but then you have that secure guy and Jones. And I'm really torn because I really think McKenzie could be a huge playmaker for this team. I mean, we saw it on that punt return for a touchdown. And even early in last season, before all the fumbles started happening, he was explosive. He had a couple big returns early in the season that just almost broke it all the way. And so it's hard to really want to give up on that so early, especially when I've been hearing he's been doing really good in camp. But there's still that. I know last week you said don't fault him for that fumble, but when he has that fumbling issue from last year, it's still hard not to, like you said, get that PTSD or those flashbacks to last year. And I think this is a team that turnovers are going to make or break whether they're a playoff team. So do you really take a chance on a high-risk player like McKenzie?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a part. However, field position is going to be a big part of this team, special teams. They need to win it, and McKenzie's made a couple good plays. I know this game, I feel like nobody really gave him credit, but that muff by Yadam where the ball bounced back and hit him, McKenzie very awarely jumped down, and the game might have been totally different because the Redskins, I was after their first punt, and the Redskins would have had the ball, I think, within the 25-yard line. So McKenzie, he's going to have to show in this game again, but right now I'm leaning towards him instead of Patrick just because I think he has a more obvious role on this team, and if you're keeping a 5-6 wide receiver, they need to have that niche role where they can contribute every week, and as a returner, McKenzie's the most explosive one they have. Tight end, Hireman and Butt, definitely, and after that, it gets questionable. Fumagalli, I think he's going to be put on the IR. We'll see him next season. Hopefully he'll be healthy, and that hernia will be all straightened up. But after that, Austin Traylor, Brian Parker, and Matt Lacoste. I think Austin Traylor is going to make this team due to his versatility, being an H-back, being a fullback as well. Will they keep 4 tight ends, though? We'll see. I think Brian Parker and Matt Lacoste have both flashed a fair amount, and I do think both are eligible for the practice squad as well. But there's too much okay depth on this team at tight end, but there's not really any obvious great talent. even Hireman, he's flashed some, but do I fully believe it in the regular season? I think Jake Butt has only had one reception in all of preseason and has been really struggling in pass blocking. So a lot of tier 2, 3, tight ends, but not really any great ones. But hopefully we'll see some of these guys step up in this game.
Looking at this group, I honestly think they only keep 3.
That's what
this could be that one position where they really just go a little bit light because they want to keep more talented players at other positions and go a little bit more depth-wise at some of them. And I don't know. I just think they're going to be running so much 3 wide this year anyway, trying to get Cortland Sutton on the field, that having that 4th tight end, I just don't see that being as important. So I just think Hireman, Butt, Traylor, the other guys, try to get them on the practice squad just in case of injury, and then hope you can keep them around till next year and see if they can become something. That's kind of my opinion on this position.
Yeah, can't disagree. Offensive line, obviously all those starters are making it, but after that, the only guys that are for sure for me are Cyrus Kouandjio being that backup offensive tackle and Max Garcia being that backup interior offensive lineman. After that, though, it gets questionable. Sam Jones, he made some good plays week 1, but again, he's had back issues since that first game. So potentially a guy, again, put on IR. Wouldn't be the worst for the Broncos because that means you get him a full season to get healthy, keep working in the training room, get that body to where you want it to be for next year, and then give him a full chance to make that 53. Just that's not the worst because then you can kind of stash some guys, give them a redshirt year, just like Chad Kelly last year. But after that, a lot of questions. You got Elijah Wilkinson, Billy Turner, Patasia, Dielman. So I'll be interested with the offensive line play to see who steps up. I do have Turner making it right now, and nobody else out of those ones that I listed, but it's possible that you could see Wilkinson there as well.
I definitely think Turner has the advantage right now just because he has versatility. He's played guard, he's played tackle, he's played left and right tackle, and I think Wilkinson has looked better at right tackle, but versatility really matters for those backups, so that's why I would have him in there.
Yeah, no, I can't disagree with you. I think backup right tackle is probably the spot I feel the most concerned with because of Valtier's injuries. And Kouandjio, I have not seen him take a single rep at right tackle yet. So definitely concerned there, but that's about it. Many teams have issues not only with the backup offensive line, but the starting offensive line across the league. So, beggars can't be choosers. There's just not a lot of good offensive line depth even starting right now in today's NFL. Defensive line for sure in, guys. We have Wolf, Pecco, Gotsis, Harris, and Walker. But after that, there's some guys. The main ones I'll highlight here are Zach Kerr, Clinton McDonald, and Kyle Pecco. For me right now, I have Zach Kerr making it because I feel like he has the best ability to play nose tackle, and with Pecco's age and everything, I think that's important. And nobody else really on the roster besides Kyle Pecco looks like a true guy who could come in and play nose tackle. I do think right now Shelby Harris is listed as the backup nose tackle, but that's not what I've seen from where they've been moving these guys around. Harris has been the 0 and the 1 when the Broncos are in sub package, but that's a little different. And we've seen some of Gotsis too, but as a pure base nose, I see Zach Kerr as that guy more than Clinton McDonald, which is too bad for Clinton McDonald because he's a talented guy. They might keep both of them, who knows, but I think probably they're going to keep 6. And if I had to pick, I would pick Kerr over McDonald at this point. And never know what happened. He did have that shoulder issue, the infection. If he was able to be there in training camp and everything, maybe he would have made it over Kerr if he flashed, too much. And he did have the good amount of sacks last year for Tampa Bay. But like we said, this Broncos defensive line is very deep. And when that happens, odds are you're going to have to cut a deep or a talented player that's going to be snatched up elsewhere.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Kerr makes the team over McDonald. I just think he offers that more, again, just well-rounded game. I saw him flash a little bit in the pass game, not as much as McDonald, but he was definitely a pretty good player in the run game those first 3 preseason games. And, you got those pass rushers in Gotsis, Harris, Walker, and even Wolf a little bit. I think he'll show more as the season goes on. And so I just think you need more of that run stopper. And that's been part of our problem, especially with the starting unit so far this preseason, is we're giving up big chunks of run. So I just think he's going to make it. And like you said, when you're not having to worry as much about the health issues, that makes a big difference too.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you can save some cash by moving on from McDonald and keeping Kerr. So just more versatile, heavier, can fill in for that nose tackle. I think all of that adds up. But maybe they end up keeping both. I don't know. We'll see. There's some tough decisions coming down the line for them. At edge, obviously Vaughn and Chubb are making it. There's no way that doesn't happen. Ray and Barrett, based on talent and merit, should make it. However, there is a chance that one of them will be traded before the roster is cut down to 53. Worth monitoring. There's been some talk about Shane Ray being moved. That would be interesting for sure. I wouldn't be against it. Save some money and open up a spot for Jeff Holland. He's been getting some league interest as well, and he's an undrafted free agent, going to be on a cheap contract. And while he's just going to be mostly depth this season as that fifth edge rusher, next season with both Barrett and Ray hit the market and will likely walk, and because the Broncos are already paying Vaughn and Chubb a huge amount of money, Holland becomes your third edge rusher on a very cheap and controllable contract, which very, very important, very huge. Marcus Rush, he's flashed, he's played well, but with the depth the Broncos have at edge, I just don't see a spot for him. And Gerald Garcia-Williams, he's been a guy who's been off ball and edge. He was actually taken off on a cart today in Broncos practice, so he's probably not going to be here. But I'd love to keep Rush on the practice squad if they can. To Holland, there's no way he's going to make it to the practice squad. There's too much league interest for him, so probably keep 5 guys. But there's potential that maybe they'll trade Holland or Ray before that happens.
Definitely. I'm with you completely on that group. And so that leads us to another very controversial group of what's going to happen here, and that's the off-ball linebacker. And we have 3 guys we know are going to make this team, Marshall, Davis, and Jewell. And then you got guys like Alexander Johnson, who they just brought in, who just had a number change. And that is important to keep an eye on because, if a player's allowed to make that kind of decision, it means they have a lot of interest in keeping them around. Then you have Bierria, Anderson, and like you said, Garcia-Williams got carried off on a stretcher today, so we're not sure what his status is going to be moving forward. And this is one of those positions I really could see them going outside of the roster to fill that final spot if they decide to keep 4 of them. I don't know. And you had mentioned something kind of crazy on Twitter today that got a lot of attention. And it was the idea of sticking with only 3 off-ball linebackers so that maybe you could get Sua Cravens onto the 53-man roster and then IR him after the original 53, because if you want to keep him on that short-term IR where you can bring him back during the season, they have to be on the roster, the opening day roster. So, that could be an idea of then when you get Sua Cravens gone on IR, then bring in either Alexander Johnson. You had brought up a guy named Corey Nelson. Sound familiar, Bronco fans? So there's some options there that maybe they could do. Do you really think Alexander Johnson, though, would make it to the practice squad?
I'm not sure what the specifics would be for his contract, and if he was released, if he left, would he get the same kind of money? Like if he came back for the Broncos, if he'd still have that contract? I'm not sure. It'll be interesting to see. They paid him a good contract and they changed his numbers. So I'm just trying to think of a way that they can potentially stash some talent on this team. And one way to do that is that IR designation for return. I did bring up the Cravens one. He did practice today, and I was told that actually Cravens, they have talked about something like this, but it wasn't Cravens they've talked about it. It's Parks, who's dealing with a knee injury. So it'll be interesting to watch that going forward. But off-ball linebacker, after they brought in Pac-Man Jones, I'd say that off-ball linebacker depth is probably the area I'm most concerned with on this team. It's the talent up top. It's all the way through. That said, with how much Joe Woods is playing more and more defensive back, safeties in the box, et cetera, maybe they can get away with only keeping 3. I don't know. We'll see. It's too bad that there's only a 53 roster spot, and if they do keep 3 quarterbacks, that makes it even tougher. But it'll be interesting to follow this. But I think, for sure, Marshall, Davis, and Jewell. After that, who knows? I think Keyshawn Bierria, practice squad or elsewhere. He hasn't really done anything. Joe Garcia-Williams, injured. Zaire Anderson, he's been a guy that's in there, but gosh, probably the least impressive guy on that second unit. And that's even with how poor the secondary has been, the cornerback specifically. And then Alexander Johnson, I have a hard time keeping him on the 53 when he's shown so little in any real action outside of special teams. So I don't know. This is the most confusing area for me looking at the roster.
I'm with you. Just because it is lacking the talent, it's kind of hard to see which guys to keep and how to keep him. Like I said, Alexander Johnson, he's shown well as on special teams, which is kind of what you want those backup linebackers to be good at. So is Josie Jewell. I've loved watching him on special teams. But you still, because Marshall and Davis both are very injury prone, you need some backups that you can trust to come in and actually do the right thing on defense. And Alexander Johnson, I mean, I feel for the guy. He spent the last 5 years kind of fighting to save his reputation and save himself from going to jail too. I mean, there's just been a lot thrown at him, and he hasn't been able to focus on football. So it's going to take him time. And he's going from not playing in college football to all of a sudden he's jumped to the NFL after not playing for, what was it, 4 years, 5 years?
Something like that. Yeah, it's been a while.
It's been a while. That's a big jump for anybody, even those that have been playing football within the last 6 months. And you're asking this guy after 4 or 5 years to be ready to contribute on a 53-man roster.
At least he's not coming back from injury.
Well, yeah, that's true. That is true. But it's still, that's asking a lot, even for great players. So I'm torn on that, because I do think because he had so much interest around the league, I think he had 10 teams really fighting for an opportunity to get him into training camp. I think some team would maybe try to pick him up. But you're just going to have to take some chances here. The Broncos are just going to have to do that. They did that with Sloter last year, and obviously it didn't work out. I mean, he went off to the Vikings and is maybe going to beat out Trevor Siemian this year, which is, oh my goodness, just shows again how bad our quarterback play was last year, that a undrafted guy named Sloter could maybe have been the best quarterback the Broncos had last season. But anyway, back to the actual Broncos here. I don't know. Again, you're just going to have to take some chances and try to get some guys squeezed through and just hope for the best. But you might lose a couple guys that you really thought could contribute to this team.
Yeah. And now moving on to a group that is concerning as far as depth goes. You got the Broncos cornerback group. They did add Pac-Man Jones, Adam Jones. Tremaine Brock has looked solid out there, in my opinion. Not amazing, but solid. Chris Harris Jr., I mean, has he even been targeted this preseason? He's been killing it. And Bradley Roby up and down, but mostly covering teams number one. So I think those four are in. Maybe Tremaine Brock doesn't make it, but I feel like his contract is like 100% guaranteed or something ridiculous. So that would be a huge issue to bite off. And also, I thought he's looked okay in preseason. So I don't know.
Right.
Yadam's got to be in. I mean, he's just a third-round pick, and they like him, but he's not ready yet. He needs to add strength. He's going to be a press man corner. Well, right now he's very skinny and lacks the strength and the technique to be that press man. And once he gets that press down, I think he's a little bit stiff. He's not an amazing athlete, recovery speed, but I feel like once he's there, that's going to be very helpful for him, because that's going to be his game. And then Langley, I think Langley should make this team, but a lot of people don't. And I'm not sure if I'm overvaluing special teams or people aren't valuing it enough, but far and away, in my opinion, I don't think it's remotely close. Langley is this team's best gunner. And that's, whether it be chasing down punts with Marquette King's leg, which will be big in Denver, or, setting up big blocks for return games. Langley has been the guy who's consistently stepped up in special teams and been the guy that has made the splash play or the needed play to keep an opposing team splash play from happening. So right. I know he's not been great on special teams, or defense, although I do think he's improved there. But as far as his special teams contribution goes, his contract, how young he is, and always supposedly going to be a project, I think there's just too much active roster value to move on from him just yet. So does that mean the Broncos keep 6 cornerbacks? I would look to do it. I think you got to keep these 6 guys, because you don't want to move on from those young guys yet, because each have a value. And if you do that, then Yadam's probably the inactive guy on the roster, working to get his body better and better. You have to have those game day inactives out there, because Langley is going to make huge contributions in special teams. But we will see. I have been asking about information on this, which way they're leaning, and haven't heard it yet. So watching these young guys, we're going to need them to step up and play better in this 4th preseason game for sure. And the Cardinals have decent depth at quarterback, so it'll be interesting to watch them. Outside of that, CJ Smith, he's probably a guy on the back burner that if there is an injury or something, he'll probably be a guy that gets called in, but hasn't shown enough. Marcus Rios, meh. Michael Hunter, meh. Goodbye. Thank you for filling out the roster, but not this season.
I guess before today, I didn't even realize that there was much of a question of whether Langley even made this team. Until all of a sudden on Twitter, people started going crazy when you were talking about him making the roster, and I was like, have you not watched this guy on special teams? Like you said, that's a very important part of the game. The old saying in football is you win 2 of the 3 units, you win the game. I mean, that's just how football usually goes, unless there's some crazy turnovers or just the Broncos in 2015, their defense just outscoring teams' offenses. That's special. That doesn't happen very often. But beyond that, you need to have a strong special teams unit. You need to have a good either offense or defense to go with that. And Langley, I don't think it's even close of who's been our best special teams player, at least beyond the kicker punter kind of talk. But Langley, I mean, he's been there making tackles. He's been on so many plays. Like you said, he's ready to make blocks and good blocks. There's a lot of value in that kind of player. I think of Kayvon Webster in 2015 season, the playoff run, especially that Pittsburgh game. There was like 2 or 3 punts that he was able to down within the 5-10 yard line that really made a big difference, where he was the one guy down there that stopped the football from going into the end zone. And those kind of plays they save you 15, 20 yards that the other offense has to drive on the field. And that could be the difference between points and no points. So, I just don't even think that there's a discussion of whether Langley's making this team. Maybe there is more than I'm thinking, because he has been pretty bad on defense. But I think this team has shown that they really value special teams. I mean, going out there and getting King, they've added to the coaching staff. They've done a lot of things to really improve the special teams unit. And so I can't see them making a decision that actually really hurts it.
If the Broncos do end up keeping Brendan Langley, I think I will do a film article. It's a little bit late now, and we'll see what happens. It's just Saturday, but I'll do a film article on Brendan Langley, highlights from special teams, and why that's valuable. Because I know it's the third phase of the game, but we've said it on here before. You need to win 2 of the 3 phases of the game week to week to have a chance to really win the game. If you're losing both offensively and special teams wise, you need monster turnovers, maybe some defensive points scored if you're going to win that game. So having good special teams, already having that phase one every week with Brandon McManus looking good, Marquette King punting well, and then coverage units with guys like Langley, bolting down the field as a gunner. That's a huge way that you win football games, especially if you have a good defense. Last year, the Broncos had the worst average starting field position in football by I think multiple yards. They were farther away from the 31st team in ranking from the average yard starting field position than I believe the Browns, who were 31st, were to 15. That's how bad they were. It has a lot to do with how many turnovers Simeon had as well. Constantly putting the defense in a bad spot, but and also had to do with the puntings being not great last season. But coverage units have been good in preseason, and I would be very upset if they got rid of Langley, because that's just such a huge part of the game that they need to continue to get better at. So we'll see. Safeties now, it's going to be interesting to watch the safeties because, man, as we talked about earlier, DeMonte Thomas had a great game. I think he's got to make it now, especially because I think he's got some free safety ability as well. Justin Simmons, best safety on the team. Darian Stewart, I think this is probably his last year in Denver. Maybe he ends up being the surprise cut. I'm not sure how the contract would look that way, but Stewart's, he's not as good as he was 2 seasons ago, but he's still a valuable veteran, in there, can play free safety, strong safety. Park's injury, maybe he'll be the guy that gets on the IR. We'll see. But he looked really good in that week 1 game, and he looked good until he got injured against the Bears, which is unfortunate for him, but I don't think you can sneak him through. Craven's a guy, is he going to be on the field this week? I think he's got to be, right? He's been practicing, but we'll see what happens there. Who the heck knows? Your best ability is your availability, so Craven's got to get on the field. Otherwise, there's no value there. I'm surprised how many people are really going to bat for him, too, with how good Parks and Thomas looked. I posted this on Twitter. I said, am I crazy to think that maybe they'll put Cravens on IR, designated a return, to be able to fit in another guy on the roster? And people were talking about Cravens like he was, the best linebacker in all of football. And he did show some at Washington, but it was very limited action. He did not have too many snaps in Washington. And he hasn't done anything yet for the Broncos. So I'm not sure what people have in mind. There's definitely potential there to be a good dimebacker, but it's all potential until he's out there. And again, your best ability is your availability. So maybe people are overhyping what he can bring a little bit, and also underhyping that's not even a word, but not really quite comprehending how good Thomas and Parks have looked in camp and in preseason. So we'll see about that. I don't think Marshall Moore or Shamarko Thomas make this team, but Simmons, Stewart, obviously in. Thomas has got to be in, I think, with how he's played. But the Parks and the Cravens injuries definitely make this a more interesting position, and I really hope we can see Cravens out there this week.
I will tell you, Darren Stewart will not be cut. His contract doesn't make that possible.
Okay.
They would have $8.7 million in dead money if they cut him. Trade, $1.4 million in dead money and save about $4.5 million on the cap.
I doubt it happens. Happens.
He hasn't been performing at a level that I would think people would be too excited to trade for.
Yeah. And there's a lot of safeties out there right now.
Right, exactly. And so I think he'll be on this team. Yeah, this safety group, I have a hard time seeing them get rid of DeMonte Thomas, especially when he was the one player that you've seen really match up with a tight end. And, I mean, it's been – I can't remember the last time that I thought, wow, the Broncos really did well against the tight end group. And that game, I was just sitting there blown away going, oh, my gosh, this guy keeps making play after play after play. And I'm not saying that he's perfect. Like you said, he got out of position on a couple plays, but to have that kind of production and just show one-on-one, I can match up with this guy and run with him. That's something the Broncos just haven't had from anybody else right now. Darian Stewart, like I said, he was losing the battle to Vernon Davis. If Alex Smith was a little bit more accurate, maybe Vernon Davis scores a huge touchdown there. He overthrew him, thankfully. Justin Simmons, he can match up with the tight end, but they use him not consistently in that role. They need both 2 to 3, I'd say, safeties that can really match up with a tight end so teams can't try to mismatch and get some players in a different position. And so I really hope DeMonte Thomas stays on this roster because I can't see another team watching that third preseason game and going, no, we don't want this guy. I think he would get snatched up by somebody.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think all 5 of those guys have reason to be there, but Cravens has got to show it still. So, I mean, obviously he's come back from the knee injury, but with everything going on, I'm not going to, like we talked about last week, I'm not going to assume too much, but I just need to see it out there. And it needs to stop being a potential and be actual realized talent and fit on the defense. So we'll see there. As far as the specialists go, I mean, no competition. Casey Kreider, long snapper, going to make it. Marquette King, punter, going to make it. Brandon McManus, kicker, going to make it. So we'll see how it goes, and we will definitely review the 53 next week after the Broncos announce it Saturday. All right, well, that's going to wrap up this week's episode of Building the Broncos. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH and myself at Nick Kendell MHH. Also, make sure you head on over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports Digital, to find ours and our co-writers' articles and content, not just related to the draft or team building, but all things that pertain to your Denver Broncos. Head on over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and review and comment. Your support can help us continue to bring you our Denver Bronco deep dives week in and week out. We aren't just here to bring you the news, but an in-depth analysis each and every week from team building, game planning, X's and O's, and 365 days of covering your Denver Broncos. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and listen to all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast on iTunes and for Android users, Stitcher, as well as check us out on YouTube. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at Huddle Up Pod. Again, please be sure to subscribe and rate us and reach out to us as we love interacting with you fellow Bronco fans. You heard anything on here you disagree with? Please reach out to us. I love talking about it. I mean, I'll find any excuse to get on Twitter while I'm at work if I can, and Carl as well. I mean, we're on there pretty active and love to talk football. And even if we disagree, we're going to be as polite and just thorough as we possibly can because we're those shucks, pardon me, Midwesterners. So for Carl Dumler, I'm Nick Kendell, wrapping up another episode of Building the Broncos. We hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you next week. Go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.